Okay, well, welcome everyone. We're at just past the hour now, and a lot of attendees are filtering in. So again, thank you all for joining us. Um, you may have just heard this webinar is being recorded, so you can share with others later. You can view it again in the future. It'll end up being posted on the Climate Smart Wood Group website. Today, we're talking about some case studies in climate smart wood procurement, specifically salvaged and reclaimed wood, and have a couple of great speakers for you. Just by way of introduction, my name is Jennifer Shacken. I'm with New England Forestry Foundation. We've been a member of the Climate Smart Wood Group for a couple of years now. And this group really came together to help the building sector in North America procure climate smart wood products. And it's really built on this premise that, interest in better wood can create market incentives that improve the way forests are managed and help fulfill that full potential of forests as a natural climate solution. And so the organizations you see on this screen here are the current members of the Climate Smart Wood Group Steering Committee. Um, Others are welcome to join us if this is a topic that you're interested in as well. It's currently an all-volunteer effort with no staff. And so if you'd like to get involved or ask a question, the email address here is the best bet, info@climatesmartwood.net. But just keep that in mind. It's a bunch of volunteers on the back end when you reach out. And we've been happy to start each of these sessions with a huge thank you to the sponsors of the Climate Smart Wood Group, Lowe's, Columbia Forest Products, and Timberlab. Their funding is what's making it possible to have our beautiful website with all the resources that are there. There's an updated guide to climate smart wood procurement, and of course, this webinar series itself. If you'd like to get involved, there's a whole bunch of ways to do that at different levels. From donating, there's a donate button on the website, becoming a sponsor like the folks that you saw on the previous slide. Of course, coming to webinars like these, and then ultimately trying to put this procurement work into practice, following the procurement guide and learning more about these topics. And so this is the last bit of my intro. Just to give you a sense, we've had quite a robust webinar series this year. We're doing one every month. And this is the fifth one in the series so far. And so today we have Chris Rutherford and Ray Tamblyn. And we have Paul Hickman from Urban Ashes, who will be kind of moderating the rest of this session, and he'll introduce those two speakers in just a moment. The last note I want to have for you all is that we do have a Q&A function enabled for this webinar, so you can submit questions at any time. And you can upvote questions that other people have submitted that you really want to hear answers to. We'll probably wrap around 10 to 15 minutes before the end of the hour, and so then we'll have a chance for Q&A with the audience. And with that, I will turn it over to Paul.
Thank you, Jen. As Jen said, I'm Paul Hickman with Urban Ashes. I am also on the steering committee and executive team with Climate Smart Wood Group, and happy to introduce. We're going to start with Ray today, but both these folks I've known for a little while. Chris in particular, I think over 15 years, but also known Ray for quite a few years, and happy to have them both here today. Ray is the senior manager of supply initiatives and partnerships at Cambium Carbon, where she builds strategic partnerships and supply solutions that unlock higher value uses for underutilized wood. She advances traceability systems and market pathways that connect arborists, mills, manufacturers, and public agencies, creating more transparent and circular wood supply chains. Ray brings a cross-functional lens across business development, grant strategy, and pilot execution, turning complex supply challenges into actionable revenue-generating opportunities. And with that, I will hand it over to Ray. If you can pop in here, Ray, and I will step out and turn it over to you.
Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for having me. Let me go ahead and screen share. Let's also make sure everyone can hear me. So if not, just pop something in or ping one of the moderators. Thanks so much, Jen and Paul. So again, my name is Ray Tamblyn. I'm actually really excited to talk about procurement pathways, specifically what it takes to move from salvage to specification across different project scales while meeting that intentional sourcing procurement pathways that the Climate Smart Wood Group and the procurement guidance is really focused on. Just to ground this out, I'll start with a quick overview of how Cambium operates within these supply chains, touch on the realities of the salvage sourcing systems at scale, and then walk through some case studies as well as lessons learned around transparency, repeatability, and scalability in that intentional wood procurement. So again, the goal here is to really ground the Climate Smart Wood framework in scalable projects and real-world sourcing conditions. Now at Cambium, we believe that sustainability starts with supply chains. We're a public benefit corporation and a wood products company working across sourcing, manufacturing, and material delivery. Many of the outcomes we care about, and that most of you probably care about as well, sustainability, carbon impact, traceability, local sourcing, reducing waste, materials intentionality, all of these are often determined long before materials reach a job site. They're determined upstream, as we know, through sourcing decisions, logistics, manufacturing, procurement coordination, and supply chain visibility. This one's a critical one because part of the reason that's so important is nearly every wood supply chain looks something like this. It's kind of fragmented. There's a lot of handoffs, complexity, and steps at play. And one thing that the Climate Smart Wood Group guidance makes very clear in the prior webinars and in the procurement guidance docs is that really successful procurement depends on that coordination intentionally across all of these steps. So in order to do that, it's important to be able to operate across that broader ecosystem with the logistics, the sourcing, the manufacturing, the materials coordination, in order to actually support those repeatable salvage procurement pathways. I think one thing before I dig into some of the case studies, one thing that I want to make sure I level set on is that not every project can leverage the same sourcing pathways or the same level of documentation. So one of the things that we focus on is helping our teams and our partners right-size those procurement pathways around project goals, timeline, geography, and material realities. The goal in my mind then is really matching the project intent with what is operationally realistic in a region on a specific project or product and within the supporting supply chain. So as they say in forestry, it depends. But fundamentally, the broader Cambium platform, as well as the larger wood supply products ecosystem, supports that transparency of sourcing coordination and that materials movement, including through traditional certification frameworks. But that does not always mean default full traceability. So when we talk and when I talk about source verification and traceability today and dig into some of my case studies that I'll be pulling up, I'm talking specifically about what we call in our Carbon Smart Wood materials lines. This is where our chain of custody is maintained from source through end use. This is where we're prioritizing the salvaged and underutilized materials while supporting that source verification, the traceability, consistency, and the documented procurement pathways. This distinction matters. Transparency is a broader industry direction, and as we all know, traceability is a much higher operational bar. And that's specifically where these carbon smart wood material streams come into play, and specifically where some of these sourcing pathways like urban salvage, forest health, disaster recovery, as well as some of the blended sourcing pathway models. These all require different expectations, documentation standards, and coordination strategies. So I just want to zoom out slightly on why we prioritize underutilized and salvage wood and what I am planning on speaking on in this particular framework when I speak about salvaged. Many of you know these statistics, but I still think it's important to frame out the scope and scale of the salvage realities and where these material streams exist, and fundamentally to what volume. So too long didn't read, millions of trees are removed from urban and suburban environments every year. Overwhelming majority of those trees are going to be burned, chipped, or landfilled rather than utilized in the durable wood products systems. And so one key note here is that this material already exists across the United States, across our communities, but generally it's not connected to manufacturing or procurement pathways. On the flip side, we also have the procurement opportunities and challenges associated with forest health and disaster recovery contexts. The challenge here is often timing and infrastructure more so than material availability. Just to put that in context, last year there were 23 disasters that generated over $1 billion in total damages. That was just the large-scale disasters, not all the small ones. And for context, that generated 2 to 8 times greater volume of timber lost to mortality events than harvested. And we've got about a 1-year-ish window to salvage those materials after a disaster. So again, Climate Smart Wood guidance highlights that the salvage following storms and mortality events is highly time sensitive. So that large volume of material can become available, but the successful utilization depends on that rapid coordination. Urban areas exist across the US, and unfortunately, those disasters do too. So utilizing that wood then depends on strong regional partnerships, connected infrastructure, and the strong data. Species availability, processing, manufacturing capacities, these all vary significantly, and they directly shape what is feasible and what is in fact visible and available. So as a quick example on the way that regional species availability influences these sourcing pathways, I just want to toss up this quick map on the species that are regionally available, specifically through the mass timber lens for both existing supply and potential supply. So matching the right species, processing infrastructure, and project requirements early is what makes these projects feasible at scale and still operating within, for example, in the South, it would be difficult to do a regional or local procurement strategy sourcing from Doug fir, but rather encourage us to look more at the Southern yellow pine supply, for example. One of the things that we've learned from our work in salvaged and underutilized wood is that it is not limited to a single product category. That's, I think, really important for this group, especially when noting that as done intentionally and in partnership across the supply chain, these materials can successfully move into millwork, furniture, and mass timber systems. So as I roll into the case studies, the question here is less, in my mind, can salvaged wood be used here, and more, what sourcing structure and coordination makes it possible to use salvaged material? So with that framing, I'm going to shift over into the case studies. And again, these are examples of our carbon smart wood procurement pathways operating across several different project scales. One of the core themes that we see in the guidance and on prior webinars is that there is not that single pathway for climate smart procurement, as those different projects require different strategies, different partnerships, etc. So really, these case studies are intended to show how those systems function in practice. The first project here is the Carver cabin, which is a small-scale residential example using urban salvage. I think this is a useful example because it shows what highly transparent urban salvage can actually look like in a relatively contained project. This project used 10,600 board feet of thermally modified urban red oak, sourced and processed within that tight regional footprint, moved from sourcing through installation in about 14 months, and stayed within roughly 500 miles of the project site. So this is a simple view of how that material actually moved through the Carver project timeline. You can see a relatively tight geographic region with the 3 arborists, 2 sawmills, 1 thermal modification kiln partner, 1 manufacturer, and then ultimately that final project, all within that geographic radius. I think what this does is 2 things. 1, high levels of transparency and source visibility because that supply chain was geographically tight, but it also reinforces that these projects are absolutely feasible, but they do work best when coordination starts early enough to align the sourcing, manufacturing, and the installation timelines. One of the key successes here was, again, that tight sourcing. Some constraints, this shouldn't be unfamiliar to most of us, variability in that urban material, the need to factor in the drying timelines, as well as some aesthetic preferences. One of the other lessons here is that early procurement alignment allowed us to actually meet the client needs because the client was focused on both urban salvage and in bringing underutilized species into the higher value streams. So in this case, red oak was moving both from a urban salvage material stream, and it's generally an underutilized species. So it was diverted into a novel product pathway via the thermal modification to allow it to be used for those outdoor decking, cladding, siding, staircases. That did require some sourcing flexibility because there aren't that many kilns that process this material at the moment. So it was important that we had the early coordination. Room and board is a partner case study that's important to us because it moves salvage from a one-off story into a recurring procurement strategy. This is a longer-term partnership that we have with Room and Board. And one thing I want to note here is that the partnership started with a conversation in 2021, and the program launched first in early 2023. So there's a lot of time from early idea to actual execution for that initial partnership. We got now about 6 programs, 5 years of partnership, and about 168,000 board feet of material from English walnut, Doug fir, and Thumar red oak. In my mind, this is an example that salvage procurement can become repeatable, not just project by project. But I want to flag a couple of learnings here from specifically the graft collection. This is English walnut from orchards, so kind of an agricultural byproduct. And the wood wouldn't normally enter a traditional furniture supply chain just because of the way that it was historically treated. One of the biggest takeaways here is actually the flexible product design. I want to jot down to that really fast here. What made this partnership successful was that combination of strong relationships and ongoing coordination, but also want to emphasize how important flexibility becomes at the design level. So the original product concept called for a 6-foot table, but orchard walnut just generally doesn't produce more than about 4 feet of viable board length consistently. And so rather than abandoning the salvage sourcing stream, the design team actually adapted to fit the realities of the material stream so we could then have the flexibility to maintain the sourcing intention while creating that commercially viable and replicable project. So this is an important proof point for us, not only on repeatability and replicability, but on the importance of kind of matching the material to its end, its end product and end home. Shooting right through these, finally, we've got an example that moves from that repeatability into actual scalability conversations. This project combines urban salvage, disaster recovery, and forest health sourcing pathways into a larger manufacturing ecosystem. Couple things to touch on here. The project sourced approximately 2.2 million board feet of southern yellow pine, distributed regional supply network, and the material moved within a roughly 250-mile radius. I know that the Climate Smart Wood Group procurement notes that pathways can be combined, and that's exactly what we see here, where urban salvage, forest salvage, and regional sourcings are blended to meet the scale and timeline requirements. But this is also a good example of what the guidance calls out in that large volume of material becoming available quickly and requiring that rapid alignment. So this is representative of a larger volume of timber that meets both salvage and forest health source intentions, and a bridge from kind of that concept into a scalable procurement. So what made this project particularly successful was our ability to aggregate material from those different sourcing pathways while still maintaining the lumber quality, delivery coordination, and the traceability documentation. Again, input variability is a constraint, especially in this type of project. As we all know, unlike a traditional single source procurement model, the material quality and quantity and timing varied significantly depending on where the wood originated and how quickly it moved through the system. A challenge with a limited recovery window, especially around this disaster material, is that a lot of these opportunities are highly time sensitive. And if the material isn't identified, moved, and processed and dried quickly enough, it can fall out of the manufacturing pipeline entirely. Given that mass timber manufacturing requires extremely tight tolerances and a predictable supply condition, it was really important that sourcing decisions, manufacturing decisions happen in parallel. One last big lesson from this project was the importance of that intentional sourcing and alignment from the beginning. Because the sourcing system was coordinated early enough, material was able to move ahead of the schedule instead of becoming a downstream procurement bottleneck, or again, falling out of the procurement stream due to those timing realities. So fundamentally for us, this case study really demonstrates that sourcing the mass timber scale is possible, but only when those procurement, manufacturing, logistics, and specification alignments are treated as one interconnected system rather than a separate conversation. Now, as I tee up my hopeful screen share here, one of the recurring gaps identified in the guidance is that limited materials visibility that we sometimes encounter. So what I want to do is hopefully pause my screen share, flip to a different share window, And then hopefully this all will work out because we love that for us all. Let me know if you guys can see this map of another active project. Fundamentally, this is an active materials window that gives a little bit more visibility into how we manage the document and tracking pathways for our clients and partners that are looking for that deeper dive source verification into materials systems. And what's really important for us is not only do we have a broad picture of the lumber that's sourced, the average sourcing distance, some of the carbon implications, but we have an active chain of custody map that allows us and our partners to have a very clear sense of where material is coming from, what some of those categories mean in terms of outreach and education, which is a huge part of using these material streams in traditional buildings. And then also a sense of kind of who is involved and where that material is at in every step of the way. So I share that just to kind of give a quick glance into some of those opportunities. So hopefully I can then switch my screen back again because we are all adults here. I am tech savvy. Sweet. Love that for me. So ultimately, I know that was a lot. I think it's really important that what those 3 case studies cumulatively indicate is that in order to successfully procure materials with that intentional sourcing, the traceability and transparency, and that full supply chain coordination, also while simultaneously likely working to educate and develop the supply chain pathways at the same time. I would say what we've learned is that it's usually less about finding the perfect material and more about building the right coordination around those real world sourcing conditions in advance. In practice, we're seeing that work usually across 3 different kind of buckets of activities, and that's really helping all of the teams align on those sourcing goals, specifications, regional supply nuances, and realities early in the process. And then obviously supplying and coordinating the material. And then the third is that really tracking the material flows through the documentation, sourcing visibility, and the project level traceability as people are really interested in that deep dive drill down. So this combination of kind of advising, supplying, and tracking is really what makes some of these procurement pathways operationally achievable. And I know that was a lot in a very short time, so thanks for sticking with me and my screen sharing. And I will leave you with this kind of one thing that we have learned in our work across all of these scales, both with these case studies and our larger work at Cambium. Spanning from that single residential project, repeat furniture collections, and active mass timber systems. Sustainable sourcing starts earlier than most teams think. And that sustainability sourcing conversation requires both intentional and long-term engaged coordination and flexibility across that full supply chain. However, when those are in place, salvaged and underutilized wood can absolutely become part of a real, replicable, and scalable procurement pathway. So I will leave you with that as I pause here to turn it over to Chris, who's going to talk more about the decon side of things.
Oh, Paul, you're muted.
Sorry, got to turn the camera on, didn't turn the mic back on. Thank you, Ray. And I will do a quick intro for Chris and hand it over to Chris. Chris Rutherford is the Executive Director of Architectural Salvage Warehouse of Detroit and a Detroit Vanguard Award recipient with over 20 years of experience in deconstruction, building material reuse, and urban wood recovery. Chris founded Reclaim Detroit and is a Build Reuse Master Trainer. He previously served as the president of the Build Reuse Board of Directors, contributing to professional standards and training frameworks for the field. At ASWD, he oversees the full pipeline from intake and sorting through processing, fabrication, and sales, with an emphasis on logistics, asset ownership, and market viability as the foundations of durable reuse systems. Chris, I'll hand it over to you and take it away.
All right. Thank you, Paul. And that was a good presentation, Ray. Share my screen. All right, you guys see the presentation? I think so.
Looks good.
All right. Well, again, I am Chris Rutherford with our actual Salvage Warehouse of Detroit, and I'm going to talk more on the deconstruction uh, side of the wood salvage world. And there's going to be a lot of parallels, but some key differences as well. I'm going to start off talking a little bit about what Architectural Salvage Warehouse is and what we do. And our mission is to transform waste to opportunity, and we do that through deconstruction and building material reuse. So figure out how to advance my slide. There we go. We were founded in 2003, and we want to keep as much material out of the landfill as we can, preserve historical resources. We have programs. Our most recent program is the Community Uplift Program, where we provide no-cost building materials to Detroiters and family aid it. We do workforce development, historically working with a lot of formerly incarcerated individuals, and we ink other reuse businesses that want to work with reclaimed materials. And we offer retail sales, lumber, millwork, and construction services. And a lot of what we'll talk about today are the deconstruction and construction services, and obviously the interaction between the two. I've got a video here of a typical deconstruction process. I'm going to just talk a little bit while that is. So the procurement pathways, is that playing? Here we go. There we go. For deconstruction, where the urban wood is more of a commodity, and I know Ray talked about the differences between urban wood salvage and the size of the stock material. It's going to be even more so with deconstruction, with lumber that we salvage through deconstruction. We're going to have more, it's going to be more of an inventory-based item than a commodity-driven item. It's going to have more inconsistency, both in quality, material type, and availability, longer lead times, and you're going to have to work with people who are willing to store the material and store material through to the end project phase. Working with a local company is going to be the ideal spec, and developing relationships. Talk about today a long-term relationship that we developed Macintosh Forest, but we've done that with other architectural firms over the years as well, and to achieve some pretty large-scale projects. And going forward, we're working to continue to develop the national supply chain on deconstruction materials so that they can be more easily specified and used. But there's a lot of potential things to think about when we get into that. So let's move forward here. And just want a little bit, a typical household will be able to divert 40 tons of material, 10,000 board feet of lumber, a whole house of other building materials. That's cabinets, furnaces, all that other miscellaneous stuff. Support 8 jobs as compared to demolition, and even more in the downstream, up to $150,000, sometimes more in donation value, and as much as $2 million downstream products when you turn all of that lumber into products. Talked about our store a little bit. We're open to the public. You can come in and shop. And pathways, deconstruction is a great career path for. You can start off without any skill, and then up to a lot of different career pathways for logistics to retail to truck driving, CNC operators. And I think a lot of this, everyone on this probably knows the C&D is the largest contributor to landfills in the United States. I talked about our community uplift program a little bit already, and that's where we provide no-cost building materials to families in need. And I think this month already we've provided about $15,000 in materials to families. We just did yesterday to a family didn't have a refrigerator or a stove. We do now. I'm really proud of the program. We've been working with Macintosh Porous for about 15 years now, about as long as I've been with Paul. And we've done some big projects, Great Foundation Hotel, Will Leather Goods, Tech Detroit, among a variety of us. And they just moved their headquarters from Birmingham to Detroit and wanted to do something in their lobby that really represented their values. So they got with us and talked about what the possibilities were. We'll get into that a little bit here, but in these images, you've got the Detroit Foundation Hotel, and you can see the reclaimed ceiling up there, ceiling, but all throughout the hotel is reclaimed wood and wood products. To the right, Will Leather Goods, similar. Actually, the materials that we use there came out of the Canfield's restaurant, which is an Upcat, and the Detroit Foundation Hotel, which was the Detroit Fire Department headquarters. So if you can source the materials locally and reuse them locally, that's the ideal, or even reuse them on a project that they're involved in. We're able to do a lot of on the Detroit Foundation Hotel project. So specifically, Canfield Restaurant, which became Hopcat Detroit, had a tremendous amount of wonderful recoverable materials. On the left, you see the mid deck. Now, it had been refinished a number of times, so it was somewhat thin. And I think they were 2x12s or 13s, the sure. But then also lots of fun of like the patinaed metal panels on the outside. It had a bar that was up on the second floor. Great things that went back into products all over the city. So you'll see here process of removing that maple flooring and the decking and getting it all denailed, getting it all back intact and ready for reuse is the big struggle. And putting that to an inventory system, many of the reuse operators and salvage yards around the country don't have a shoppable inventory system. So that's one thing that sets us apart at ASWD. Again, we're trying to work with folks around the country so we can get all of that into one sum, and it can be much more easily specified. So I'm going to talk, I want to talk about the maple frame specifically that came from the Hopcat second floor. Again, it had been refinished a number of times, so it wasn't necessarily reusable as flooring again. And but it was reusable for lots of other projects like guitar blanks for Wallace Detroit guitars, a lot of other miscellaneous smaller items. But what we did is we ended up storing it for an extended period of time, so we knew it was a high quality product that Macintosh Porous might be able to specify again in the future. Held on to that for a number of years until they needed this lobby project, and we met with them, went over what their ideas were, came up with drawings, and so the drawing of a portion of the lobby with the vertical maple detail and rectangles where they're going to put their awards, and a timber finish on a reception desk, neck wall. And we're still in the middle of finished project that'll be finished in the next couple of weeks here. You see the installed version. And some of the key things when we met with, as we developed the design, you have to design based on those materials. Ray mentioned the flooring comes on various lengths. It has warp. So we put in reveals in places, make sure that the length of the material worked, did glue ups to make the lengths of the maple work, and really worked with the material they had to fulfill their vision. The key things on with architects and designers is the ability to create shop drawings, sample boards, create mock-ups, and understand their vision for the design and help guide them toward a solution that works with the materials that are available. Check my notes here. So the tolerances in the materials are going to be different than materials coming from a new material stream. The finishes, the consistency are all going to be different than what an architect is used to specifying. So educating them a little bit, but also working with them to fulfill their vision in a way that creates a beautiful end product. Here is an example of they wanted to match a 100-plus-year-old maple floor. This is a different project. So we were able to source maple flooring from a building in Toledo, I believe, and provide them finished samples and put a patch in on that floor. So it was totally seamless, and the entire floor that didn't have maple flooring with the same with flooring from Toledo, and between the two floors, they looked exactly the same. They still had that 100-year-old character. Down the road, we're looking at getting more into urban wood recovery, which Ray already talked about, increasing milling and drying capacity in our own mill and kiln, and potentially looking into biochar and the ability to provide carbon tracking, and again, to have a deconstruction on a national scale where the materials can be sourced consistently. This one more video while my notes, if it plays. Okay. This is a deconstruction of this home. In Detroit, you can see the amount of labor that goes in to take these homes apart. So I can mention, I've worked with a number of businesses, incubated them to try to figure out how they could manufacture products using reclaimed materials. And Paul has as much experience with this as anyone. I remember working with Paul trying to figure out how we could provide a consistent supply of material he needed to make his beautiful frames. He had a line of frames, and he needed grain fir for one of the designs. And when we deconstruct a home, we might have a few pieces of vertical grain fir, but don't know. We're not able to tell that. And he could through and pick out from a whole bundle, find a few pieces, or hopefully think that there were a few pieces that would work, and get them back to his shop and find out they didn't. So a lot of inconsistency, very difficult to get a consistent supply for someone who's trying to manufacture at scale with one company like ASWD doing it. So getting it to scale or working specifically for unique projects and products, especially working with architects and designers to specify for specific projects and to source materials from local projects into other local projects. We see that as a key way to make it successful and a smooth process. So some of the things that Ray mentioned, the key one is to get involved early on in a project, so those materials can be sourced. if you have a project architect, also get us involved early so we can see what we can salvage from the building before the renovation starts and possibly reuse that project. Um, and if you'd like to support our mission, you can go ahead and donate. That's all I get.
Thank you, Chris. Wanted to remind folks, the Q&A, I think we only have one question so far. So if other folks have questions you've been sitting on, now would be the time to speak up. And while we're waiting on those, one from Dan Koenig, and this would be headed towards Ray, I believe. Is there a threshold diameter of what wouldn't be collected? I'm not sure if that was towards a specific project or the specific type of material you were going after, but I'll let you take a shot at that and um, go
Perfect.
from there.
Dan, at the risk of regurgitating the same tired joke that all forestry answers usually come with, the answer is always it depends. But specifically, I will say, generally speaking, most mills for the mass timber side of things, 7-inch minimum for diameter, usually 12 to 14 for saw timber. But if there's specific species you're hoping to get more of an insight into, happy to help you get that answer or get you connected with the folks on my team that have the best insight into what mills process, what specs, and what species. But yeah, it depends.
And then another question in from an anonymous person, is the Cambium sourcing map publicly available?
Those are not currently publicly available. Those are more for our specific clients that are working with us on that level of traceability and transparency supply mapping. But we are working with general data sets like Forest and others to help kind of map out those wood processing ecosystems and infrastructure availability across the US, to inform some of those regional sourcing maps that we work with and share with our partners.
Okay. From Julie, I'm gonna pronounce your last name, Julie Fuchs. How is Cambium dealing with grading issues for mass timber? You took a question right out of, if I hadn't heard that, I was going to ask it.
What a great question, Julie. And I would absolutely encourage you to reach out to me or Charles Gale or Alexis Fitel on our Mass Timber team. Um, we have a lot of work that is going into ensuring the material that we're sourcing meets the high standards for mass timber specifically into that material stream. I'm sure we'd be happy to have a much further conversation about it, but we're absolutely aware of and prioritizing meeting grade standards.
Can you go into that anymore, Ray? I mean, at this point, without obviously a big long conversation, but what are sort of the core things you guys are looking for in the material? And, what are the issues? Just sort of high level. What are the high level issues, and how are you guys addressing them?
Yeah, there's a couple things that I'll note just in the interest of time. We currently are working within the lumber grade standards, the ASLA standards, for example. And then if our parties that we're working with in our supply chains are not certified, we help them get third party certified, either with WWPA, SPIB, or with NELMA, depending on the region. So again, it depends, but really looking to bring that capacity back into the sector. And as we're bringing those species into the market strategy, making sure, again, they're meeting spec and have that confidence for everyone involved in the manufacturing process.
Okay. From Sean with a very apropos last name, Sean Wood. Says he's a big fan of Cambium and ASWD, and he is asking the $1 million question that has been asked for decades and fist fights over and all of the above. And I've witnessed a lot of them. Uh, I'm happy to take this, or yeah, I'll let Ray. I don't even want to take this. I'll let Ray take it, or Chris. Either one of you guys have at it. But I will tell you, Sean, It is a topic of conversation pretty much every day in the industry. Go ahead, Ray. Take a swing.
Yeah, I think terminology is always our best and worst friend. I've been involved in some of those fistfight conversations. It's very hotly debated, and it really depends. Again, God, I hate saying that repeatedly, but it depends on the audience because urban wood lands a certain way depending on who you're talking to, salvage and fresh cut versus deconstruction. So I think what's more critical is that the yeah, exactly. Thank you, Rick. USRW also has addressed the definition challenge in conversation. But I think for us, what's more critical is the ability to tell the story around the material origin, because we have generally found that one terminology or one name does not encapsulate. It causes confusion. There's a lot of debates. And so if we can say this material is from here for this intentional purpose and reuse, then it helps us kind of sidestep the, is it urban salvage? What is salvage? What is fresh cut? What is fallen? And so absolutely, Sean, hotly debated. Would love to sit down with you and chat through all of the debates at any point.
Chris, you want to talk about how that's, the terminology and how that's impacted your guys' work and how you guys manage it?
I don't think I really have anything additional to add to it other than it does definitely uh, cause confusion. So it's an opportunity to teach people it, but it's yeah, I don't have a good answer.
I'm going to drop in
Actually,
here.
Paul, if I could also double click on that, I think Chris is exactly right. It's an opportunity to have a conversation around it instead of trying to come up with a quick answer. It's really, for us, it's like, well, what do you think that material means? What kind of sourcing are you looking to tell? What kind of strategy is at play with the materials structure and conversation? And then helping people understand the nuances within and work through that debate so that they're also educated and empowered as they're taking that material choices upstream through the different project conversations.
Yeah, I'm going to put in the link to the USRW standards, which is the third-party certified standards and certification program for the industry. And within there, there's a good definition. I'll try to, or Rick, if you can find it quicker than I'll try to find the exact definition. My sort of abbreviated version of it, I think, is relatively tight to that. But the phrase I use, well, backing up a little bit, with the term urban wood, the challenge is that's the term that's been in the industry for so long that it's really hard, and a lot of companies, including our name, have built their brand around it, and not just built their brand around it, but all of their branding, the language, and so that's a big reason why it's really difficult to extract that. But the definition that we use that is pretty similar to what's in USRW, it's just a little more fluid for us, is any wood that came from any tree that came down for any reason other than its wood value. It can be urban, suburban, or rural, and it doesn't really matter on that location. The urban does have a misnomer to it. It can really come from anywhere, and including, I think Ray, showed pictures of architect or agricultural salvage. The reclaimed part there is typically tied in with deconstructed. So, Sean, you are correct that it always requires a further explanation of what exactly material you're looking for and where did that material exactly come from. So that's, it's always debated, and including in Climate Smart Wood Group, we really debated in the procurement guide how we wanted to define that. And I do believe in there's a relatively similar definition to what's in USRW. So hopefully that sort of answered your question as best we possibly can, Sean. Anybody else? Let's see, we have a couple more open. Um, So from, again, my God, these names are going to challenge me. Mariki Fenton, in your experience, is there typically more demand for these products than supply, or is it easier to supply than to find users? I'm going to start with Chris on that one, and feel free. on the decon side, Chris, on the deconstructed side, what's your take there from the deconstruction side?
I think that there's plenty of supply. It's a matter of still increasing the demand so we can increase the salvage rates. It's so chicken and egg when it comes to that, but there's plenty of wood for construction and urban lumber from trees. Definition. Uh, so in both cases, I think the supply is currently greater than the demand, or the potential supply is certainly greater than the demand.
Ray, you want to pitch in from the urban salvage side?
Yeah, I would say supply is to echo Chris, supply is much more available, and it's a two-part barrier. One is the connection between that supply and the processing infrastructure to move it from kind of general available supply into a material that actually can meet the spec and the demands for the product or the building in question. And so that connection between the two is really, it's kind of niche, starting to grow much bigger. We're hoping all of you reach out to both of us after this conversation. But really, it's that connection between the supply and the demand, because the supply is there, the demand is growing, and then it's how do you find the right kind of matchmaking opportunity for the right demand, the right material, right project, right spec, all of those nuances. That again, it depends. Love the answer.
And Rick did post appreciate that, Rick, the exact terminology out of the USRW standards, which is urban wood is defined as any wood that was not harvested for its timber value and was diverted or removed from the waste stream and developed or redeveloped into a product. Urban wood can come from three sources: deconstruction, fresh cut urban trees, or salvage trees. And it goes into further definition in there, what salvage trees are. They're often defined as agricultural byproducts like the walnut, but also even trees that can come from thinnings, for forest health, storm damaged trees that are out in rural areas and things like that. So that really does cover it. And there's more in there, Sean. I do recommend that any of you interested in urban salvage and or deconstructed material to read through those standards and to give you more information. Brad Guy, as this is being picky, I think a confusion is calling lumber products from buildings wood. It seems urban wood is clear. Trees can be salvaged. Salvaged lumber is in the word lumber, unless you can call it a tree simply lumber. I agree. And we'll take that to heart in the next round of fistfights. But I do think I hear what you're saying, Brad. And you'll also see, unfortunately, a fluid change between lumber, timber, and wood. It kind of evolves, and unfortunately, probably sometimes it's not as accurately used as it should be used. But that is definitely a terminology that we should take into consideration as the industry does try to refine this, and hopefully we can all come to an overall consensus. But that is still an ongoing process, I can say. Anonymous attendees, those definitions do not necessarily translate to other codes and standards like IBC lead and environmental product declarations. You guys want to, either one of you jump on that one from an anonymous? The definitions do not necessarily translate to other codes and standards like IBC lead or environmental product declarations.
Yeah, I can touch on that briefly. I think obviously the definitions are the definitions and the terminology is the terminology. And when you look at building codes and the standards and what's required from a sourcing conversation, where we're starting to really see a lot of traction with the kind of material sourcing points for LEED or IBC or other environmental product declarations, is the ability to track that sourcing from where it starts into the end product. If it's a local regional sourcing point, materials within miles of said building, etc. So I think there's a definition of that allows everyone to kind of have that same educational conversational foundation when you're starting those early conversations on sourcing. And then it's working to figure out what kind of LEED or green building standards are looking to be achieved by using that material, and then working backward from there to build that supply chain, versus using the definition as the criteria to match the standard itself, if that is helpful.
Chris, did you have anything else you wanted to add to that?
No, I'd have to look at the specifics, and I don't have that.
It depends.
Right.
I should have just tossed one slide up that was like, it depends, and then
So,
questions.
quick comment on that. Absolutely, those are issues, and what I see are challenges there, particularly with lead, even going back to, the very earliest committees and developing lead specifications or lead material specs in the late 90s that I was sitting on. To this day, lead is still working hard and struggling on how to best incorporate urban salvaged and reclaimed wood. And it is because there's, for me personally, because it's coming from so many different sources, and the industry itself is still relatively young, even though it's something we used to do, 100 years ago as standard practice. But really, as an industry, it's relatively new, and getting those clear definitions up at the same time as the specifications or the standards, like LEED and IBC and the environmental product declarations that are happening from a variety of entities, depending on who they talk to, who they work with. We're not getting consistent cross communication or cross language, and that is a challenge. And that's a big part of what the industry is working on. Through USRW standards is a big part of that, is trying to get a uniform language. But because there's so many actors and players involved all across the country, across the world, that is a challenge, and it's going to take us time. So bear with us. And often it just requires additional explanations along with the terminology. So once you see a couple words that may not look like they match, when you see their full explanation, they're virtually the same. Unfortunately, that's where it is right now, and I'm confident, just seeing what the industry has done in the last 5, 10 years, will be there pretty quickly, that it'll be pretty consistent.
One thing too, I would chime in as a last thought on that I had while Paul was talking about some of that nuance there. I will also flag that oftentimes the market demand is a forcing function for updating some of that standardization or the criteria for what it means to have a green building or to meet some of those LEED criteria. I think we're on LEED 5. So those are both standards, and those are also able to be informed and driven by the market demand and also what people are asking for. So as you're starting to ask for these types of materials, there's also the opportunity to have a more of a forcing function driven by demand. Because as Chris and I both said, the supply is out there, and now it's elevating it into the larger conversation.
Well, thanks, Ray. Oh, go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, my computer crashed, which I'm glad it didn't do during my presentation. But I wanted to add one thing, and that is if you are able to get materials into a specification, try to make sure you don't let them put in those two words "or equal," because that allows the builder or whoever else to just buy new lumber.
Yeah, definitely, having those conversations and getting the language out there, even if it ultimately doesn't get specified, that at least it's in the communication talks in this round, and ideally, in the next one, it's not starting from scratch. We are at time. Jen, do we have a wrap up specific that we need to do? I want to thank both Ray and Chris personally for joining us. Two folks that have been in the salvage, reclaimed, urban, deconstructed, wood industry, timber, and lumber industry, to cover all aspects for quite a while. So I appreciate you joining us. Jen, do you have a wrap up that we need to do?
Just super briefly, I'll throw my thanks in there as well, and then just plug on next month's webinar. So we're going to take a little bit of a detour we've been at one end of the supply chain for the last few episodes of the series. We're going to go way back upstream to the forest for the next 2 months and do kind of a regional climate smart forestry tour. So I'll actually be one of your speakers next month. June 24th is that webinar, and you can register for it now. And then the next month after will be the Pacific Northwest. So just want to thank you all for coming. Thank you guys for great presentations. It's fun to get a deep dive into your world. And I'll just drop the link in the chat there for next month's registration. So thanks, everyone.
Thank you all. Take care. See you next month.